Yes.
It's very difficult to put the question together.
Yes.
Or to form the questions.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to put them together?
No, I don't know how to form the question.
Oh, I see. No, I understand what you're asking. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, yeah. So basically, the view of cosmology, the traditional view of cosmology, of how God created the universe and then created, the earth. And so that's the zodiacal signs are usually the beginning point, because the Corsi and the ash and the Corsi. So they begin always with the astrological signs, the 12 signs. So each of the 12 signs are divided into 4s, and each one of them have one of the elemental qualities of being either hot and wet, or hot and dry, or cold and wet and cold and dry. So it's not necessarily the concept fire, air, earth, and water, but it's the qualities and properties that these have that then are passed down through the universe. And according to traditional cosmology, they're gathered at the place of the moon. That's why the moon is so important, and the 28 stations of the moon corresponding to the 28 letters of the Arabic alphabet. And the Arabic alphabet also has these elemental qualities. Some are considered hot, some are considered cold, some are considered wet, some are considered dry. So it connects to the words also then of the Quran. And but within ourselves, what they say happens is that between the moon and the earth, it's called the sublunar world. These elements and their elemental qualities are in the atmosphere. So that's why when we hear the weather reports, we're actually hearing about the elemental qualities that are out there in the atmosphere. So these, when they reach the right proportion, and through when there's an embryo is formed from a male and a female, then that embryo is formed at a time, but depending on the elemental qualities of the parents and the elemental qualities of the atmosphere, that embryo then contains these 4 elemental qualities. And these elemental qualities, once the soul is animated by the spirit, then these elemental qualities are part of our body. And they begin, first they're undifferentiated, and then with the coming of the soul, they begin to differentiate. So we then develop our humors, which are based on the elements, and from the humors, we then develop our mizaj, or our temperament. So that's how we get it, is through, as when we were in the embryonic state, is how we first receive these elemental qualities. Then these qualities, for instance, Brother Ahmad showed that he is born in a certain sign, and yet his temperament is a different kind. So you see, is it balanced? Is it imbalanced? And so forth and so on. Because there are a lot of considerations based on the time we're born and the place we're born, the environment, the
hours.
Of the at the time that we're born, and also our parents. But once it forms the humors in our body, then it's balanced within our body through the mother's blood that we receive through the embryo. That's how we're nourished, and that's when her monthly cycle stops, because she's feeding the embryo. So that's why what our monthly cycle is for, as females, is to nourish the embryo of the children that we're going to have. So once the child is born, then begins to eat different foods and drink different liquids, and that then develops their, if they're healthy and balanced, then they're fine. But if they develop an imbalance of some sort, then it's their mizaj which has changed because they've eaten something, for instance, that was the wrong, had the wrong temperament. So not only do the astrological signs have these elemental qualities, but it's in the sublunar atmosphere, and then it's in the within the embryo, forming the humors and then forming the temperament, and then it's within us as we live our lives also, depending on what we eat and what we drink. And also in its other considerations are the atmosphere, the environment, the temperature of where we're living, or if that answered your question, but it is all connected. And that's the beauty of the traditional world, is that everything is connected. There's a interplay between everything, between the universe and ourselves. And that's why the universe is called the macrocosm, Alam Kabir, and the human being is called the microcosm, Alam Mustaqir, because we incorporate everything that's within the universe within ourselves. Except that we have, in addition to that, we have cognition or consciousness, which occurs when God blew his spirit into Adam and then called forth the generative organs of the progeny of Adam, and they then also contain the spirit of God. So, but nothing else in creation has that. It has the potential for it, but it hasn't been actualized.
Thank you, sir.
Actually, one of the saying of Mr. Gurdjieff is that our bodies do not belong to us; it belongs to the universe. And
yes,
we are made out of earth, of dust. We are made out of this earth, so we belong to the universe somehow. It's just the spirit that animates us.
Yes,
somehow.
Well, in the Islamic view, it's because of wujud. So God exists. God is existence. So everything in the universe exists. Everything has wujud, but some have, it depends on a weakness or intensity of wujud, what has attained to consciousness and what has not. So we all owe our existence to God, so it doesn't really belong to us. In other words, we've kind of borrowed existence from God.
Yeah.
And God is the one who sustains us. So this is, there may be people who think, well, what about evolution? And this sounds kind of like evolution. But the difference is that evolutionary theory is based on the body changing. It's based on the body. That's why they say, for instance, we began with gorillas and so forth, because their bodies are similar. But it's actually, in the traditional world, they do believe in evolution, and there's a great poem of Rumi which, kind of explains it all, but it's based on the soul. It's based on our nafs that is created along with our body, according to some philosophers, and it runs parallel with our body, and then it begins to move away from our body as we attain maturity, around the age of 15. And so we begin to come more into reason and consciousness and so forth. And so then our soul begins to move away from that. And then the goal is to reach the spirit or the intellect or the aql within us, and to complete that cycle. And then that's called the arc of ascent. The way the elements came down to us through the sublunar world and then into our bodies, and then the humors and the temperament, that's all called the arc of descent.
Yeah.
So yes, our bodies do not belong to us. We're kind of like, you could say, on borrowed time, but it's borrowed from God, because God exists. So God is existence. Therefore, that's why we exist. And that's why all of the universe is alive, because existence created all of the universe.
Yeah. Okay, do we have any other questions before we start? May, Summer?
Okay.
Okay.
So yes, so we're in this course, we're going through trying to understand the symbol of the Sufi Enneagram.
To focus with
We're trying to understand the symbol of the Sufi Enneagram, and we're looking at it, for instance, as a piece of architecture, in the sense that it's actually, and I should also say that there is no psychology, complete theory of psychology, that has a symbol the way the Enneagram does. None of them do. So this is a guideline, and that's why it was called. So now we're trying to understand the different elements through an analysis of the different elements, and I've chosen to discuss them in terms of dynamics, matter, surface, shape, space, and space. So yesterday we did the dynamics and the matter and the color. Well, color we also was one. And now we're going to turn to, and we did surface, and now we're going to the concept of shape. So in terms of the concept of shape, we've already talked about the importance of the outer circle, the circle, and the center point as part of the traditional world, that's showing that this symbol comes from the traditional world, because so many times our existence has been described as the circle of existence. Or just yesterday I was reading some parts of Al-Buni, and he talks about the circle of lights. And so because Brother Ahmed was asking if other people have mentioned the concept of the circle. So we've discussed the circle and we've discussed the center. So now we're going to turn to the lines, which are the shape that gives shape to the Sufi Enneagram. So to understand that, and this is the line of the spirit that moves from 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, and back to 1. So to understand the line of the spirit, we have to understand the traditional view of numbers and geometry. We don't obtain shapes when we obtain shapes when we delimit space. So when we previously had just the circle and the center point, this inside here was all empty space. We didn't have anything there. So, except we said that that's where the soul lies, but we didn't have any shapes inside there. So now we're going to understand geometry and how that forms the shapes. Geometry expresses the personality of these numbers. So through the use of numbers and geometry as mathematical expressions, we can create shapes that recall the Alama Mithal, imaginal world, or archetypes. So it's this was also how we mentioned in the section on shape, why geometry and numbers became so important in the Islamic world, because we were forbidden from creating images. So we then resorted to geometry and numbers and created the most beautiful forms of art based on that. So we can also understand the concept of shape based on proportion and the proportional system. And this side here are all musical notations, and how music can be, the octave can be, you can have an octave or fifths or fourth or thirds. And this is, I think, what intrigued Gurdjieff so much about the Enneagram was the musical elements that he put, that according to Opensky, he put on the Enneagram. He put the do, re, fa, sol, la, mi, do on the Enneagram, on the 7 of the 9 numbers. He didn't put anything on the 3 or the 6, and he called those the shock points. So a person who understands the traditional views all creation as creation from the one, from Tawheed, from the Wahed. And this view is one that shares a commonality of proportion with nature that can be quantified through mathematics. I'm sure you've seen, for instance, the golden mean and the golden rectangle and so forth that early Greek mathematicians understood nature from. So much of nature is based on proportion and on mathematics. And so that gives us a clue that also this is part of God speaking to us and helping us to understand the universe that we live in. Creations are observable through laws of similitude, symmetry, and geometry. It follows that all shapes, surfaces, and lines arranged in conformity with the proportions inherent in nature reflect ideal systems of beauty. And this is sometimes where the Western world, particularly in the world of art, they no longer respect, for instance, symmetry and proportion, but it's more abstract. And so you don't see the same mathematics that you see in nature. Resting on an objective foundation, independent of the human being and subjective taste, a beauty is attained that is universal and eternal, such as that of the Sufi Enneagram. We also discussed the line, which shows over here, the concept of the line, and then how the images of the arabesques and geometric forms we saw through line the geometric forms, and this is more kind of an arabesque form that comes from the division of the lines into different, like the fifth or the seventh or the third, which is also explaining musical notes more in kind of a diagram.
May I ask here a little, can you explain more the relationship between the string? What I understand from this is a string that we divide. This is 1/2. This is 1/3. This is 1/4. This is 1/5.
Yes, each one of those. Yeah, in music, they produce different sounds.
Yeah.
So the symphony would be like the fourth symphony, for instance, would be based maybe on the fourth. So the notations would emphasize this aspect of the music. But if we look at the lute or the oud, and I think it's called the oud, the lute. For instance, the Al-Farabi wrote a great treatise on music, on Islamic music and how it relates to these elements. And also Ibn Sina did the same. So I myself am not, I don't read musical notes, so I'm not able to kind of explain it more, but it depends where you put your finger on the strings, what note you're going to be getting. And then that provides the rhythm to the music. Did that help?
Yeah. And what about these circles? I mean, this is a flower, or these are just shapes or ornaments that comes from dividing the circle to 6 parts, for example, and this is for 4 parts.
Yes, to a 6th. Yeah, or to a 7th, or to a 4th. Yeah.
Okay.
You take the line and you divide the lines like into a 4th. And then that produces the musical tone as you're connecting one dot to another in a 4th element.
I guess that's what we call ربع tone يا أحمد, but I don't know how to apply it on the shape. This is ربع tone in music, in Arabic music, when we use the laud.
Yeah, so when you put your fingers on the strings, you do, for instance, a 5th of the string is, for instance, do, and then 7th is re, and 8th is la, and so it connects through that.
Tone is a tune, means tune, sound.
Yes.
So, but in Arabic, they changed the word a little bit. So it's become tone, but as if it's a tone, but it's tune.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It comes out.
Yes, that's right, how it comes out, yeah. The same we saw, for instance, with the flute. It's where you put the holes in the flute and then how you breathe through it, through what pressure, what of the holes on the flute you hold down in order to get the right tune, like you're saying.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're seeing the importance of concept of line in another way. So now the human being as the measure, as the unit of measure, in the Sufi Enneagram or Bajullah, the head is at the top, the heart is on the right, left, and well, it's actually the right on the drawing, and the liver is on the right, which is actually on the left. So why it's describing it this way is that this was within us, and left side, and our liver is on the right side, if we take this image and put it inside ourselves. So this shows the importance of the correspondence in the body, as well as the proportion arrangements emulating the human body. Proportional arrangements emulating the human being perpetuate the creative beauty that is manifested and confirms the Quranic verse. And there is not a thing, but its treasures are with us, and we send it down not, but in a known measure. That's in Surah 15, verse 21. I think, Brother Ahmad, you said it yesterday in Arabic.
And there is not a thing, but its treasures.
Yeah, the numbers, but its numbers are known.
I can't remember. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So this is why, I mean, when we think of numbers, God is telling us that he sent everything down and his number is known. So the whole concept of numbers, as we're going to see in the next slide, is very important, within the Islamic tradition, within our understanding of the creation.
Okay.
Okay. So now we look at the human being as the microcosm and the inner signs, the signs that are within us, based on the Quranic verse that said, we show our signs upon the horizons and within themselves until they know it is the truth. That's 41:53. The signs used to define ourselves in the Sufi Enneagram are inseparable from the traditional concept of mathematics. Numbers and geometry are not just what they appear to be quantitatively. They have a qualitative aspect that is as much a part of their reality as the quantitative. When seen in its symbolic sense, each number and geometric figure is an echo of unity. So, you start with like 1, and then 2 is 1 plus 1, 3 is 1 plus 1 plus 1, and so forth and so on. So everything goes back to 1. So the unity, the Tawheed, the Wahdat, everything comes from the one, the number one, or God as one. Then, shows us how things go back to the oneness of God.
Yeah, I also can add here that regarding this qualitative aspect of numbers, that in the biogeometry, Dr. Ibrahim Karim, he teaches us to use, specific shapes. Those shapes are repeated for a specific number to harmonize or to fix the energy within the architectural space in a certain way. So each number, like 16, has a function, the 11 has a function, the 7 has a function, and so on. And this is depending on the quality of that number. So by using this quality of the number, it affects the space in a certain way and harmonizes and removes the bad energy or the harmful energy for the human being. So it's and it is fantastic. Yeah.
So the quality is what results from, for instance, using the 16 or the 11. So the number is the 16 or the 11, but the way that you use it then creates a quality within the space that you're designing that is different. So it's not just the number 16, but it's that quality that division represents within the space.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. So we've seen this before in the concept of shape in the science of numbers and Arabic letters. The 28 letters of the Arabic alphabet have healing powers, not only as letters of the alphabet, but also because of their numerical correspondence based on the Quranic sign that we just saw, that everything, its number is known. Everything God sends down, its number is known. The 28 letters of the Arabic alphabet.
I can tell you the verse in Arabic if you like.
Oh, yes, please.
وإن من شيء إلا عندنا خزائنه.
Okay. So
this is سورة الحجر آية 21.
Yes. So we see the importance of numbers. That God is telling us that He sent everything down in some kind of number. Is that right? Is that?
Yeah.
Actually, it means more that everything is down there. It's from my vault.
From what?
My vault. You know, when you have a vault that you put in it your expensive stuff.
Oh, a vault. Oh, yes, the treasures. Yeah, that's like the treasures, the treasure vault. Yeah.
Yes. So everything that comes to you is from my treasure vault.
Right. But the rest of the verse,
And when I put it, when I send it down to you, it's
known measures.
The known
measure. Yes. Yeah. So measure, in a sense, is like proportion or numbers and geometry and so forth. So the 28 letters of the Arabic alphabet are numbers in 4 groups of 1 to 9, 10 to 90, 100 to 900, and 1000. These correspond to the 9 points of the Sufi Enneagram. So for this drawing, I'm very grateful to Brother Ahmad who drew this because originally it hadn't been correct. The letters had not been correct and he corrected them. So it's based on the Abjad system as we go around the circle. And then the numbers are then as they are. And we saw that you can, use these numbers for determining the names, the divine names, the Asmaul Husna, what their number is, and then finding their correspondence with other names or with our particular name. And so it's as we're going to see in the next slide, what Al-Buni says. He says that numbers symbolize the spiritual world and letters symbolize the physical world. So the numbers that are here are aspects of that the measure that God sends everything down in a measure. But when it comes to our world, not only is it a number, but it also has a letter that corresponds to it. So that then that connects to the Quranic verses and to the divine names and to talismans and many, many other things. But the letters are part of the physical world, whereas the numbers are part of the spiritual world. So Ibn Khaldun said the secret of activity lies in the numerical proportion of the letters. So the proportion of one letter to another in different Arabic words is also very important and significant. The letters of the alphabet indicate numerical values that by nature are inherent in them. So when you see the re, it inherently has the number 20 in it. So once a person has memorized this chart, then they can see you might even say the quantitative and qualitative aspects of it, but here the number is the qualitative and the letter is the quantitative, because you're indicating numerical values between different letters. And that's how, for instance, we get Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is 786, 786, because we add up the numbers of we add up the letters, the numbers of the letters, and we get 786. So then and many people, instead of writing that on a letter, just put at the top 786. And here many people try to get a phone number that begins with 786 or has 786 in it, and so forth and so on. So, and this is, all of this idea is in the Al-Buni, the Shams al-Ma'arif. He explains all of it. And as I mentioned, Al-Buni is the first person to have taken all of the, to have taken the concept of numbers and letters into the Quranic world. Previous to that time, they were not connected to the Quran, and so they were considered to be black magic. But when he did that, then it became, he did it as an arif, as a Gnostic, and did great ascetic practices in between the letters and the numbers. And every book you read after his time is based on something that he wrote in his 2-volume work or in his other works as well. He was Algerian, but he spent his life in Cairo, in Egypt.
Is he buried in Egypt? He died here in Egypt?
Yeah, I think he must be, yes.
Okay.
We could find out where he's buried, yeah.
Okay.
But
So this is Al-Buni?
Yes.
Who lived in, okay.
Ahmad Al-Buni.
Ahmad.
His first name was Ahmad Al-Buni.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. Oh, we're here. Okay, so we're continuing with the concept of shape and the science of numbers in Arabic letters. So the numbers 0 to 9 on the Sufi Enneagram, or Vajullah, are symbols of the Arabic alphabet. And as we said before, it doesn't work with any other alphabet because, for instance, Persian has 32 letters, Hebrew language has 22 letters. So it only works with the Arabic the Arabic alphabet, because the 28 also relates to the 28 stations of the moon, which Al-Buni goes into in great detail. And there's a correspondence between this, where the moon is at a certain time, and the Arabic alphabet and the letters. The alphabet corresponds to the same 4 elements and their 4 qualities. That's what we saw, for instance, in the astrological signs, as do the planets, as the universe is seen unfolding through the sound of the letters. So the sound is something that, for instance, we were also talking about the word natiq, aql natiq. So natiq comes from the word to speak, to have speech. And this is the one of the important distinctions between us and the animals that, or the animal soul, the nafs amare, that we share with animals, because we're able to speak. But the sound is something that when we speak, the sound disappears after we've said it, but the letters are something that remain. So the sounds are considered to be from the world from the spiritual world, and the letters are from the physical world because they remain afterwards. The sound disappears and the letters remain. So this is very important in understanding the concept of the world of command, as well as we could say the sounds are from the world of command, whereas the letters are from the world of creation. And when God says kun fiyakun, that means he's just saying be. He's just giving a sound and something is created. So this is another important concept of the relationship between sound and letters. Ibn Khaldun, in the Muqaddimah, he says that they divided, he was talking about the Sufis, they divided the letters into 4 groups corresponding to the 4 elements, earth, air, fire, or water. Each element has its own group of letters. Through this group of letters, the element may be active or passive. So hot and cold are considered active, and wet and dry are considered passive. A technical procedure they call breaking down, or taksir, classifies the letters as the elements are classified. The fiery elements serve to repel cold diseases and to increase the power of heat either in the physical or astrological sense. In the same way, the watery letters repel hot diseases such as fevers and so forth. The fact that it is possible to be active in the world of nature with the help of letters and the words composed of them, and that created things can be influenced in this way, cannot be denied, Ibn Khaldun is saying. It is confirmed by the continuous tradition on the authority of the human being. And by that, he means through oral tradition. Actually, I was just reading some parts of Al-Buni, and I sent them to Brother Ahmad, for instance, on the letters that appear at the beginning of some chapters of the Quran. Combine them all, and they're called the letters of light, whereas the other letters that are not these 14, the other 14 are considered letters of darkness. So for the person who is doing the healer in terms of talismans and so forth, he would only work with the letters of light. He wouldn't use the letters of darkness. And for those people who want to cause harm in the earth, then they would use the letters of darkness.
Okay. And does this relate to, because you mentioned that the 28 letters is related to Manazil al-Qamar, or the station of the moon. So
yes,
half of them are dark on half. I mean, the moon, it gets, the black and white goes bigger and bigger and bigger at the end of the month. So it's does it relate to this? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes. What he says is there's certain times when the stations of the moon, when you must not, if you're writing talismans, you must not write them. Because those are dark days.
Okay.
He mentioned, yeah. But for people who are not writing, because it's a very strenuous process to a lot of asceticism, a lot of fasting, a lot of extra prayers and so forth, to be able to actually write a talisman and feel that God is with you, that you have God's grace in what you're doing. But to use the talisman, you don't have to have gone through all of that if you know that the creator of that talisman was someone like Al-Buni, who was an arif and who had gone through all of the correct procedure in attaining a closeness to God and the presence of God and the grace, the faiz, the ilahi. He had that quality within him, because he led such a good life, a pious life, full of, growing closer to God. So if we were to use the talismans that Al-Buni created, then we're not creating them, we're just using what he created. And that's different than if we wanted to, on our own, create a talisman. And he warns often about misusing them, and what happens to the person who misuses the knowledge that he's given. But as I mentioned, in his many of the copyists of his manuscripts, which were of course originally done by hand, made mistakes on purpose so that someone wouldn't actually be able to use them. So that's why it's important to have what's called a critical edition. And to work from that in regard to the talismans as well as the text.
Yeah.
So, can I just say a comment in this regard regarding the relation between numbers, letters, and the astrological aspects of the moon and our system and our elements? It means that in the material world, in the modern world, we are not really connected to nature.
That's right. Yes. That's why we can destroy it so easily.
We are not connected to nature and its spiritual aspects. We are only connected with the materialistic, which is related to description of its content, the metals and minerals and whatever.
Yes.
If each element, for example, fruits, its size, its color, its natural character, but we're not really understanding why it is created as such.
Yes, and what we do then is manipulate nature and create what they call GMOs, and we create, you know, we crossbreed things that weren't by nature supposed to be crossbred. So some of that is good knowledge because it does help. For instance, maybe there's combination of two fruits that will be more helpful and give you more vitamin C, or you know, something like that. But some of it is it's creating a problem within our digestive systems because it's produced. We're not eating, so that's why we have the whole development of organic foods, which have no pesticides and are not created as GMOs. So yes, that's exactly right. We're not understanding nature in the way that it had been created and up until the modern world was understood. And that's why it's so easy for us to corrupt the earth with all, for instance, the plastics that are filling up the oceans, or, you know, we're not conscious of, or the, you know, the smoke that's causing the pollution and causing the climate to change and so forth. So yes, that's the problem, is because we're not connected to the universe and to nature in the way that we originally had been.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So each of the 99 divine names and qualities is either balanced, cold, or hot, based on the science of letters. And that's what we studied extensively in the previous course. So I think the next, there might be one that has a chart of the, no, there's another one. No, that's the next one, but there was one that we had developed in the other, which showed the letters and the elements of the letters, but it's in the other course, I think. Okay. Remember how we had earth, air, fire, and water, and then the letters that are, yeah. So that's also helpful. That could be added to this one.
Okay.
Okay, so now this, again, we're with the science of numbers and Arabic letters on the concept of shape. The numbers filling each square are so arranged that their addition in any consequent matter, vertical rows, horizontal rows, or diagonal, totals 66, the symbolic number equivalent of the word Allah. So however you divide, you add up these numbers here, it's going to give you 66. And then the calligrapher wrote, you know, Allah, the name Allah here. So these are kind of, I mean, I find them amazing. I mean, I'm just fascinated by how you can use numbers to reach, you know, this is called the magic square. So how you can put numbers, and Al-Buni also puts letters in the magic squares, and then you have certain words that are, when you go back to the numbers, then they have a particular significance. So Ibn Khaldun said that they're magic squares for words as they're, I'm just said, as for numbers. Each group of letters has a particular kind of magic square that fits in the view of either numerical values of the figure or the numerical value of the letters. Activity based on letters thus merges with those based on numbers because there exists a relationship between letters and numbers. You could go back and see which one of the divine names, for instance, adds up to 19 or 26 or 21, and see within Allah what are these names also? What are these divine names that are contained within the name of Allah? But we know that all of the names are within Allah. But this is just I don't know. I found it very interesting how they. You know, it's kind of like God speaking to us when we can put numbers this way, or this way, or this way, and they all add up to 66, which is the name for Allah. The name of Allah, yeah.
So what's the logic behind this?
I don't understand how the numbers.
Pardon me?
The number. Sorry.
Yeah, when you, if you add 20 diagonally, 21, 22, 23, you get 66. If you add vertically, 21, 20, 25, you get 66.
Yes, but how they decided that they should put 22 in the center and 18?
Well, they worked out, they wanted, because the numbers were going to add up to 26. I mean, to 66.
Okay, but the numbers itself, themselves, yani 21, 26, 19, what do they represent actually?
Well,
do we know this?
Yeah, they're just the number, which is has a particular connection because it's part of the numbers for Allah's name, for instance. But they did it from mathematically, came to the conclusion that if you put these numbers this way, you get 66, no matter what direction you're coming from. No matter whether you're going vertical, horizontal, or diagonally. So,
yes, thank you.
Okay. Samar, do you have a question?
Yes, would you please, Dr. Bakhtiar, re-explain the concept again, and its relation with Allah, and why we have 5 cases, horizontal and vertical?
Okay, well, this is called a magic square, and it's a 3 by 3 magic square. So they created magic squares in order for people to, for instance, carry this magic square with them. So whoever carries this talisman or this magic square with them is carrying Allah with them. So some people believe that gives them an extra protection because Allah is with them in terms of not only numbers, but it's always with them. It's not, even if they forget at a moment, the blessings are still there because the number is there. So when they added up the numbers for the Aleph and the Lam, He, they came to number 66. So then they did through mathematics, well, what numbers add up to 66? If you want to put them in a 3 by 3 square, then how would you divide 66 into threes, where when you do it, any way you add it up, it comes up to 66. So that's how they got the numbers. They were trying to find out, okay, what is 66? What numbers compose 66?
Okay.
Did that help?
Yeah.
In a sort, yes, but I still don't get it. Why we have 5 cases here? You are talking about 3 and the number 66. Why we have 5?
No, if you just
5 by 5,
this,
you mean 5 by 5.
It's 3 by.
Yes, 5 by 5. Why?
No, it's not 5 by 5. It's 3 by 3, and the other numbers are just giving you the total of 66.
Okay.
It's just showing you that this square here, 3 by 3, if you add up the numbers diagonally, horizontally, or vertically, you're going to get the 66. And this 66.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, thank you.
يعني 25 و22 و19 16 يطلعوا 66. 23
Yes.
24 19 يطلعوا وهكذا. It sums up to 66 in all cases.
Right, in all
Yes.
cases.
Yeah. Great.
And it was just a nice design, so they did it.
Yeah,
they do it.
It looks fantastic. It looks very nice. Yes. Yeah.
So this, we're continuing with the concept of shape, and now we're just getting into numbers. This is the famous image called a Tetraktys by Pythagoras. And it has that he taught his philosophy on this pattern, which was known as the Tetraktys, which is a triangle of 10 dots arranged in symmetrical relationship. So these numbers, he arranged them such that on this side are the even numbers, on this side are the odd numbers, and this was his famous diagram. If when you study mathematics or geometry, you'll learn of Pythagoras and the Tetraktys. I forget what he's called in Arabic. Pythagoras. Is that what
Pythagoras.
Pythagoras, yeah. And I don't know what the Tetraktys, but tetra means 10. So it's based on the number 10. So this is another example how numbers are important, because through numbers we relate back to unity and back to the one. Numbers are the ordering principle of nature. Numbers are a projection of unity, never separated from their source, which is one. And the one gives its name to every number. Number persists because the one persists. So you can't have a 6 without a 1 first. You can't have an 8. He was very much into the idea of the oneness of God, as was Plotinus. Plotinus was another early Greek. I think he lived in Alexandria.
Yeah, Plotinus is the Aflutine.
Aflutine, yeah.
No.
And he wrote the Enneads.
Yep.
It's all based on the 9,
yeah.
the number 9.
Mm.
This one is based on the work of their very famous, they call him a geometrician. His name was Keith Critchlow. He lives in England, and it's called Islamic Patterns. Also, you can find information inside Hossein Nasser, Science and Civilization in Islam, and Introduction to Islamic Cosmological Doctrines. But Keith Critchlow has done amazing work in the world of Islamic patterns and mathematics. He's analyzed tile patterns in mosques, and he's just
I have
amazing.
2 of his books, and it's extremely sophisticated. He's done a very, very, very deep analysis of those Islamic patterns.
Yes, he understood it completely. I mean, he's really amazing what he's been able to understand from Islamic patterns, yeah.
Does he live in the States, or?
He lives in England. He's quite elderly now. He may be 85, something like that. But I believe he's still living.
He still gives courses, and I think he's very active.
Yes. Does he teach at the college that Prince Charles started, something like that? Yeah.
Yes.
Very wonderful.
I think he also describes how the geometric forms were originated. I mean, the triangle and the square.
Yes. Yeah. So if you're more interested if you're interested in more knowledge about the numbers and geometry, he's a very good person to read his works.
Yeah. Do you want to take a 5 minutes break?
Okay, sure.
Okay. So we take 5 minutes break now. Okay.
Okay.
في تليفون يا جماعة ايفون، مين التليفون الايفون؟ اسمي مش واضح. مروة؟ اوكي. طب ما تقول صباح الخير، طيب اي حاجة.
امبارح كان الكورس يعني ظريف جدا. وعندي أسئلة، بس أعتقد هتبقى آخر اليوم النهاردة أو المرة الجاية بقى قبل ما نبدأ.
مفيش مشكلة، في آخر 10 دقايق نخليهم questions أو قبل ما نبدأ يوم الخميس.
أنا دلوقتي في مكان يعني، بس بعد شوية يمكن أسمع وأنا بسوق، فمش I'm not sure، بس أعتقد إن ممكن نستنى بقى.
أوكي.
بس أعتقد إن الكتاب بتاعها الصوفي هو اللي كانت بتتكلم فيه على قصة إزاي رابطين المثلث بفكرة the knower and the knowledge. يعني في علاقة ما بين ليه هو اسمه مثلث وليه شكله مثلث وليه المعنى اللي وراه. أعتقد مش
السنس اوف يونيتي برضه كانوا بيتكلموا عن كل الشيبس يعني، وعلاقة الرقم بالشيب.
طبعا بس التاني ده كان بيتكلم بشكل تفصيلي يعني بس على geometry ما كانش في حاجات تانية. ف I think it's her book. It's not يعني مع نادر أردلاني يمكن. I'm not يعني أنا مش فاكرة الصراحة كان مين اللي كاتب.
اوكي بس هعمل ميوت، هعمل بس تليفون قبل
اتفضل. sure
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Ready? So now we're going to into more detail about numbers. So, for instance, the number 3, when the center point enters the material world as potential, it is the number 1. The number 2 is symbolized by the passions. This is like 1. This is 2, the passions, which were the Quvvat Shahwaniya and the Quvvat Ghazabiyya, or attraction to pleasure and repelling of harm. And the number 3 is symbolized by the passions and reason. So when the center point divides into the 3 aspects of the self, it enters really as just as one thing. Then when we add the passions, it becomes 2. And when we add cognition, it becomes 3. So it shows how the Enneagram incorporates the number 3, not in the sense of 3 on the circumference, but just the idea of a pattern from 1 to 2 to 3. And this is actually how we're created. We're created first with when we're first born, we have the nafs ammare, but later when we're older, as we grow, we develop our abilities to reason. So it's also developmental as well. And then 3 is also, we can see these 3 divisions, which we did, and we talked about the many levels of how you can discuss the same thing. So whether we talk about the letter C in English, cognition, at the spiritual biological level, it's to preserve the eternal possibility of self, because the idea is for our cognition or our reason to discipline our passions, which are down here in our nafs ammare. So by doing that, then we have a possibility for eternal to be, for the resurrection and the day of judgment, to have our souls at least live forever. So psychologically, we could it's called cognition, and this segment is called behavior, and this segment is called affect or emotions. As this was the preserving the eternal possibility of ourself, the cognition. In the area behavior, it's to preserve us as an individual. This is why it's also called anger, is because we need to be able to defend ourselves if we're being attacked or being oppressed, or so we need that definite possibility. And we can certainly see it because this is the animal soul. We can see it within the animals, how they protect their territory, or they protect their wives, or whatever it is, but they have this ability in their behavior. And then in the area of affect or emotions, it's to preserve the species, which is our reproductive possibility, so that we continue to have a society. At the second, and this is 1, 2, it just means there are 2 levels to talk about it. In terms of psychology, we can call our cognition the intellect, or we can call it our behavior, the avoidance of harm or pain, or we can call our affect and emotions attraction to pleasure. And this usually includes sex and food are the major elements of attraction to pleasure, when it's kept in moderation, because it can go beyond moderation and be overdeveloped or underdeveloped, as we'll be seeing. In terms of physiology, the cognition is in our brain, and behavior is in our heart segment, and affect and emotions are in our liver section. In terms of cognition, our cognition, by being cognitive, we're capable of consciousness, but our behavior is pre-conscious, which means we can discipline it. And for instance, in the animal world, we can train, or we can domesticate animals, or we can train horses, or we can train dogs, we can train cats, we can train them, because we can train their behavior, and also our own as well. And then in the affect level, it's unconscious. So our emotions and our affect is unconscious, and it's more difficult to discipline because it is unconscious. In terms of the Quran, this can be called the rational soul, or the nafs an-natiqah. This is, in terms, our behavior is half of the animal soul, which is the nafs ammare, and our affect is the other half of the nafs ammare, or we can call our cognition reason, or aql. And in terms of Quranic, we can talk about it as nahi and al-munkar, to prevent the negative, or counseling to the positive, which would be our affect. But in all cases, we're talking about the same thing. It's just we're using different terms, and sometimes we think we're talking about different things, but it's the same. It's the same thing. So again, we're still at 3. Each of the threefold divisions of the self symbolize either a balanced or an imbalanced self. The balance is being these here on this small triangle, and the unbalanced or imbalanced are the ones on the circle. The circumference holds the imbalances, an imbalance in terms of quantity, too much or too little with the minus sign or plus sign, or undeveloped with a small circle. Moving away from the center symbolizes moral imbalance. So as we move away from imbalanced, an imbalance in terms of quantity is described as being either under or overdeveloped, where an imbalance in terms of quality is described as being underdeveloped. That is exactly the moral trait where the moral trait is completely lacking. So this again shows the number 3 on the Sufi Enneagram. Now we're going to concept of shape, to the negative traits or vices according to traditional psychology. And as I said, these here that we're going to go through are just examples of imbalances, but we could, there are many other ones that we could name. And certainly in the books on ethics, they do name many others. But each one of the virtues may be explained as either quantity, underdeveloped, which is with a minus, or overdeveloped, which is plus, or quality, undeveloped, based on quality, and that is with that small 0. There are many vices that can be listed in each category, but here are the main ones. The 8 is a minus because it's underdeveloped, a wisdom, which is too little reason or wisdom. 9 with a small circle is disbelief, no reason or wisdom at all. And 1 is hypocrisy, too much reason or wisdom. Then if we look at the behavioral segment, cowardice is too little courage, fear is no courage at all, and 4 is rashness, too much courage. When we look at self-esteem, or this is also called temperance, we can see that the 5 is timidity, too little self-esteem. 6 is envy, no self-esteem at all. And 7 is greed or lust, which is too much self-esteem, too much devoted to ourselves, kind of narcissistic kind of personality.
Dr. Laleh, can you just give some examples of other names that we can put here instead of those mentioned here, the 9 names here? Just an example.
Right. Not offhand, but I could do it for next time. I could give it to you. I can give you.
Okay.
Other names. Yeah. So the concept of shape, now we get to 4 as number. There are 4 elements, earth, air, fire, and water. 4 physical natures, hot, cold, wet, and dry. There are 4 humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And this blood is the sanguineous, the phlegm is the serous, yellow bile is bilious, and black bile is atrabilious. But this is easier terms those are kind of Latin terms. To be balanced and centered means that the 4 positive traits are physically balanced in a combination of the 4, cold and dry earth, hot and wet air, hot and dry fire, cold and wet water. And these are the showing here where we want to be on the circle to be balanced. And these are the 4 virtues of wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. So here we see the elements with the 4 qualities and the zodiacal signs. So for instance, Capricorn is cold and wet. I can't really read that other. Cold and wet. Oh, fire. Oh, so cold and dry has to be water. Cold and dry. Oh, earth, it's right in the middle. It's earth, cold and dry. And then these are the element and the zodiacal signs that are the air signs. These are the zodiacal signs and elements that are the fire signs. And these are the elements and zodiacal signs that are the water signs. So the cold and dry are earth signs. And this is also, as I was saying, if you were to do the Indra report or report on your astrological report, which it's important to nurture, then you would find that it's going to tell you how much earth element, how much water, how much fire, and how much air element you have, and then the personality that relates to that. So whereas here we're not talking about the personality, we're just talking about the that properties, cold and dry, but they also relate to personality types. So earth refers to compactness and cohesion of the parts, while the coolness demands movement downwards. It is black bile, the atrabilious humor, Virgo, Taurus, and Capricorn. Cold and wet are the water signs, manifests expansion due to its humidity, while its coldness demands a descending movement. It lacks compactness and cohesion. It is phlegm, the cirrus humor, or Cancer, Pisces, and Scorpio in the zodiacal signs. Hot and dry, or fire, shows coherence, cohesion, and ascending motion. It symbolizes the tendency of the parts to move towards one center. It's the bilious humor, and in the astrological signs, it's Leo, Aries, and Sagittarius. Hot and wet is air, refers to swelling, expansion, the opposite of dryness. It has an ascending motion. It is blood, the sanguineous humor, Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra in the zodiacal signs. I can, if you want, I can send Brother Ahmad from the zodiacal chart what these 4 elements are, which relate more to personality. And then maybe you could pass it on to people.
Okay, sure. That would be great. Yeah.
Yes. There's a question.
Questions? Any questions? Okay, so yeah.
Okay. So now we're looking at 6 as number. 4 as a static form becomes the square, but 3-dimensionally it becomes 6, or the cube. So you can read this as a cube. And we know the most famous cube, of course, is the Kaaba, which means cube. In Islam, it's the Kaaba, the supreme symbol. The Kaaba is an outward symbol in the material world of the presence not seen by the eye, just as the body is an outward symbol of the world of form and contains the spiritual heart. As the Quran says, whichever way you turn, there is the presence or Fajr of God. As the spiritual heart, it symbolizes the throne of God that was upon the waters, according to, this was Surah 2, 115, and this is Surah 11, ayat 7. So we can see on the Sufi Enneagram, if you extend the points, you can actually see the Kaaba, draw the Kaaba right within the center of the Sufi Enneagram. Although it's not present always on the signs, but it's there in kind of a hidden sense. So it represents the number 6, although 4 is a square, but 6 is when it becomes a cube. And the verse there's a hadith that says that the throne sits throne sits upon the waters, and oh no, the throne is the heart of the believers, and the Kaaba is also believed to be the heart of the believers.
Okay. Summer has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand that the Kaaba in its original shape and form was not a cube. يعني it used to have Hijr Ibrahim, Hijr Ismail included in the original building, for say,
Well,
not a
yeah,
cube, not the one we have it now.
right. It may be, but the Hijra Ismail is an external element. It's like a porch. It's not part of the building itself. So it's still a cube without the Hijra Ishmael. If it was connected, maybe at some time, but it still is like a porch. It's not part of the Kaaba in the sense of the cube. You see what I mean?
Yes, I do. But I thought that so originally it was not a cube. That's why I was asking.
Right. No, I understand. But I think that the Hijj is because it's not a wall that goes all the way to the top and forms space.
Yes.
So even if it was connected, still the Kaaba is the cube. I don't think people would have called it the Kaaba if it weren't the cube.
Kaaba is, yeah. Exactly. Okay.
Okay. So now we get to the famous 6 and 7. So if you divide 1 by 7, or 1 by 7 and so forth, all the way down to 6 by 7, you get that recurring decimal. So when 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are divided by 7, it results in a 6-figure recurring decimal that appears 6 times in a different order, but in no case do the 6 figures contain the 3, 6, or 9. When the numbers on the decimal obtained are placed on the circumference of the circle, it is called the line of the spirit. The line of the spirit indicates the path to moral healing. So we can see the numbers. We go from 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, or we go from 2, 8, 5, 7, 1, 4, and so forth. Going through these different numbers, it shows how we move on this line of the spirit.
Can I ask how these numbers are reflected on the line of the spirit indicated? You mean that the numbers on the surface of the circle, these are representing the decimal?
No, this is the line of the spirit. This shows you how to move on the Enneagram, on the Sufi Enneagram, or the Enneagram. Shows you how to move because these numbers were considered very special, that they denote 3, 6, and 9 in them. So that's how you can draw this from 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, and you miss 3, 6, and 9. You miss them because they're not on the line of the spirit. That's why Gurdjieff, for instance, didn't put anything for 3 and 6, and he called them the shock points because they're outside this recurring decimal. This is considered kind of like a miracle of numbers, that how can that it's interesting. I mean, how does it happen that when you divide 7 by these numbers, or you divide these, 7 by these numbers, you get this recurring decimal. I mean, it's kind of a miracle of numbers and mathematical interesting point. And that the fact that there's no 3, 6, or 9 in them. So this is another distinction between the Sufi Enneagram and the Enneagram that Gurdjieff first drew, according to Opensky, that differs from the Enneagram today, because today, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they're all personality types. And there's no distinction made between 3, 6, and 9.
Mm-hmm. Because 3, 6, and 9 are the points of balance. And
but that personality of 3 is not considered. Do you call the personality of 3 a balanced person?
I'm not sure.
different than 2. And
he should have 3, 6, and 9 to be a balance. Yani, the balanced person needs to have the 3, 6, and 9 within himself.
oh, okay. So if he's a 2, he's also supposed to have 3, 6, and 9 within the 2. If he's a type of 2.
No, I'm not talking about the Enneagram itself.
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why the 3, 6, and 9 are here. They're not drawn here, but this is other drawings. You see it because that is the balancing point. That's where you tell the virtues in moderation, in balance. So that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I thought it when you the statement, the line of the spirit. It is called the line of the spirit. I thought it can be represented in a diagram or something. Or are you speaking about the?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there are other ways of expressing it, but this is how the Enneagram uses it. Yeah.
I have a comment here or a question, because you know, the if I can draw a line here, this number, sorry, this line and this line and this line, they are not part of the lines of spirit, although we use them in the surgery to move from the, you know, the point outside the circle to the balanced point, to the 3.
Yes.
Yeah. So
right,
what are these lines? I mean, what can we call them?
Right, that's a good point. It's the only way to get someone back on the circle.
Yeah.
So you go directly to that virtue. But yes, that's interesting. What do we call those lines? Yeah.
Okay. So we cannot move. Oh, okay. So we cannot move from the 6 with a small circle to the number 2 or 9. We can go to this. Yani, okay.
Yeah, with
it's interesting. It's interesting to know this. I didn't.
Yeah, from the 6, for instance, if the 6 were drawn here, from this 6, if you're doing poison, you go to either 7+ or 5-1. That's if you're treating with the poison, because these are opposites of it. But when you're in the stage of surgery, you have to go directly to the virtue.
Oh, okay.
So he's asking, yes. So then, what are these lines? That's a good question. What are these lines called? Yeah.
Yeah, and also this one, because this line, which is this one. Sorry. I mean, this one.
We can see it.
It's sorry.
Yeah.
It's we have this and we have this as part of the dynamic or the lines of spirit, but this one is not in the Enneagram as well. So this also.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
So this one, something that we might think about. Yeah.
Yes, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does create the parallelogram, which we had when we talk about the concept of line. It does create a parallelogram, and this as well as this one, which is a parallelogram, and this one. If you can bring, I don't know if you can bring back that one, but so it can, in that sense, it's there, but yes, it's not, it doesn't have that line, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're looking at the numbers of 3, 6, and 9, and this Sufi Enneagram relates to the zodiacal signs. Both are related to the elements. The numbers 3, 6, and 9 are cold and dry. The numbers 1, 2, 4, 8, 5, and 7 on the circumference are hot and wet or hot and dry. The line of the spirit then relates to heat, hot and wet or hot and dry. So the line of the spirit, when it connects these, it's connecting the hot elements of these numbers, what these numbers represent. Whereas the 3, 6, and 9 are the cold elements, cold and dry. So now that we're continuing with the concept of 7. So 3 plus 4 is 7. And 7 is the first complete number. It's odd, square, exceeding, and perfect. It is from the 7 that we obtain the recurring decimal that forms the line of the spirit. There are 7 sources of the names and qualities, and these are called the divine predicates. These are the 7 qualities that God has, that he's given to us: life, knowledge, power, will, speech, hearing, and sight. These are the special names and qualities that are that 7 corresponds to the 7 planets visible to the naked eye in the macrocosm. It corresponds microcosmically to the 7 subtle centers, or 7 prophets of our being, and these are the 7 prophets who received a divine law. So they were Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, Jesus, and Muhammad, prophets symbolizing the spiritual heart. So we don't know much about the divine law that Adam received, or Noah or Abraham, but we certainly know about Moses, David, and the Psalms, Jesus and the Gospels, and Muhammad in the Quran. But they are considered to have given a law.
But don't you think that there are some other prophets that received the divine law, or?
No, these are the only 7 mentioned in the Quran.
Okay, in the Quran, yes. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, interesting. But what about Idris?
Yeah, no, he was a prophet, but there were, 124,000 prophets based on hadith.
Yeah, I know, but Idris, didn't Idris receive
have a
any?
law. No.
Okay, and by law, what you mean by law?
The Sharia.
It's not, yeah, he has some revelations, but it's not a law. You mean? Is that what you mean, or?
He has some what?
Revelations. I mean, he God gave.
Right. Oh, right. He received some vahi, but he didn't form a law, which means the Sharia. So he didn't really. It was more spiritual rather than social, in the sense of how people need to behave, coming from God's guidance.
Okay.
So he was a person unto himself. He was, do you see what I mean? He didn't have a following in the sense of, like Khidr.
The Khidr, yes, yeah, I know, yeah. And it's interesting also in Sayyidina Adam is mentioned here, because you said that we don't know about the divine law that has been revealed on Adam specifically, but because he's the first man, or
yes.
Yes, I believe he had something, because it's at the time I think they needed some law to, and first I don't know, the first people on earth. I think the law was needed.
Somebody have
what about David?
Sorry.
David is the Psalms. Zabur.
Zabur, yes. Zabur.
Yes.
Summer?
Thank you.
Yes, if we go back to the law of 7, the one divided by 7, 2 by 7, 3 by 7, and so on, and we don't have the digits 3, 6, and 9. Why we include the 9 in the 7 thing? Why we don't keep the 9 as outside as well as the 3 and 6? Why we have only 2 shock points, not 3?
No,
this is my first question.
Right. No, In the Sufi Enneagram, you do have the 3, 6, and 9 outside, but Gurdjieff didn't.
Okay, but when you talk about the 7 attributes or the 7 yes, attributes of the divine, you talk about 7,
Right.
although they are 6. We have 6, not 7.
Right. The line of the spirit is 6, yeah. Right. But the divine qualities are 7, the ones that are predicates. Because you have both 7 here is important, and then the fact that it only goes up to 6.
Yes, that's, yeah. So I don't see why we have it 6 and then we have it at 7.
Why we have what? Oh, well, the line of the spirit is 6
Yes.
numbers, but you're dividing into 7. So 7 becomes important as the divisor.
The second question is about the prophets. You
Yes.
say only 7 prophets, as mentioned by in the Quran.
No,
But there are more than 7
there
mentioned
are
in the Quran.
25 prophets mentioned in the Quran, but only 7 brought
Yeah.
a law.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it wasn't
Yeah,
clear.
okay. Thank you.
Oh.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
I found this slide is very inspiring actually, because these decimal are representing also geometric forms within the circle.
Yes.
Which one?
That's right.
This is the pi. The relation, the line to the circle. Yeah.
Okay.
The pi.
Yeah.
So it means that figures are also presenting morals. I mean.
Yes.
Yes, this is really inspiring.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah. So now we get to the concept of 9, and we saw last time a slide that showed us the number 9 as it appears in the Quran. There were 3 places where number 9 appeared, like 9 miracles were given to Moses, and then there was the city that had 9 groups of people who caused corruption in the earth. So this is an example of a man named Kashani. He was a student of Ibn Arabi, and his tafsir of the Quran has been published as Ibn Arabi's tafsir, but it's actually his student Kashani. So he gives the ta'avil, or the spiritual hermeneutics of 9 from the Quranic signs, from Surah 27, verses 48 to 83. So the underlined parts are directly from the Quran, and what is in between is his tafsir, or his ta'avil of who these 9 groups were. So the Quran says there were 9 groups of persons, and he says 9 negative traits or vices. The Quran says in the city, and he says of the body, and the Quran says who made corruption in the earth, and he said who corrupted the moral balance of the body, and the Quran said and who had not made things right, and he says these 9 negative traits waged a relentless war against justice. They, the Quran says, these 9, and he says these 9 negative traits or vices, Quran says, said to each other, swear to one another by God that we will certainly attack it. And then Kashani says, the spiritual heart, and the Quran says by night, because they're going to attack it by night, he says, when the heart is in a state of heedlessness, and the Quran says, and its family, he says, its physical and psychic faculties. Their Quran says, these are their houses, and he says, That is, their places within the self, the Quran says, all fallen down in ruin, and he says destroyed. Quran says, for what they, and then he says, the 9 negative traits or vices, Quran said, did wrong. And Quran says, truly, and this is a sign, and he says, of the presence of God. And they say, the Quran says, for one who knows, and he says, of the inner self. And the Quran says, and we rescued those who believed and those who were God-fearing. And he says, that is the spiritual warriors, or the fatah and fatat. So this is a clear, just one clear example of confirmation of the Enneagram. And then we
Dr. Leila, your voice is
Hi, Dr.
Something wrong with
sorry.
Hi, Dr. Something happened.
Ahmed is
amazing
off.
point.
The whole
Sorry.
happened. I don't know.
Something happened. It's such an amazing point. Yes.
Sorry.
I wonder what kind of synchronicity that was. Telling us, giving us a message there.
Sorry.
I think so.
Your voice gone in the past two minutes. So can you repeat this?
Oh, what I just, you mean this concept of 9?
No. Just after you finished. I mean, your voice has
okay.
gone.
Yeah. So I'm saying this is absolutely amazing, because this confirms the Sufi Enneagram for sure, because it talks about the 9 negative traits or the vices, which we talked about on the outside of the circle, and corrupted the moral balance of the body. We're talking about the balance that Samar had also mentioned, trying to get back to the virtues and holding them in moderation, and particularly where our negative traits wage a relentless war against justice. So we're trying to get back to that center point, to be fair and just people, and our negative traits are preventing us from becoming fair and just people. So that's where our imbalance is and where we need to work on. So that these traits said to the spiritual heart that when the heart was in the state of heedlessness or forgetfulness, that, wake up. It's, you have to heal yourself morally in order to be able to continue on the spiritual path. And this, the heart is in a state of heedlessness, and its family is its physical and psychic faculties. So the psychic faculties were the nafsa, where we talked about the nafsaniya, the hayvaniya, and the tabiya. Those were the faculties, psychic faculties. And then, of course, our physical is our body, which consisted of the elements and the humors and our mizaj, or our temperament. And these are the places within the self that have have been destroyed because of our negative traits and vices. And this is a sign, he says, of the presence of God, of Vajullah, of the inner self, and that these then are considered to be the spiritual warriors, the masculine being the fatah and the feminine being the fatat, both of who are described in the Quran. And this is the basis for Muruwa, which we're understanding as moral healing. That's the first stage of the spiritual path, is to morally heal, and then to be ready to for the other stages, finally the stage of Vilaya, which is the sainthood. But we pass through the Futua and the Futuvat stage, where basically we may join different groups or be part of a society that is careful and conscious of its neighbors, and whatever it was that the Fatat did, and the Futuhas did. They were also the guilds, and all of the artisans belonged to a different Futuha. And as I mentioned, the book by Kashifi, the Royal Book of Spiritual Chivalry, and then we mentioned, in that book, the one that Kazi Publications published, the introduction is by a man who was very familiar with the Ottoman Turkish Empire and the Futuhas of that time. And so it's still alive today, these different Futuhas and the different artisans groups, like the tile makers and the stucco makers and the people who make the silver trays and all of the different crafts, arts and crafts. But it's not as prevalent as it was at one time. It's not as strong. So this is just absolutely, to me, an amazing confirmation of the Sufi Enneagram by a student of Ibn Arabi. I don't know if you ever could read his commentary, Tafsir Ibn Arabi it's called, but it's actually by Kashani.
Okay, the ayah here says, وَكَانَ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ يعني 9 رهط يفسدون في الأرض ولا يصلحون. The context here is the Quran was talking about Thamud, قوم Thamud, and
yes,
that was sent to Salih, that was sent to Thamud, and so on. So here the meaning, or as per Ibn Arabi, this is ta'wil, right? I mean, because there is no direct,
this is ta'wil. So you don't go to the literal, which means that this was directly related to that city. You go to a deeper meaning of what something means.
Can you please, Professor Leila, again, or tell us more about the crafts and how it is related to the 9 negative traits mentioned in this?
No, well, I was saying that the spiritual warriors are the people who are related to Jabon, what we call it, Persians call it Jabon Mardi, but it's actually Futuha. So in the traditional world, all of the arts and crafts people, people who were engaged in arts and crafts, like tile making and stucco making and so forth, belonged to a group or a guild, they called them. And that guild was, over that guild was a master, not only of that craft, but also of the spiritual path. The spiritual path. So it means that these people were working on themselves and trying to get rid of the negative traits through the master that they were working with.
Yes,
because,
sure.
For one, this is a sign of the presence of God for one who knows of the inner self. And then the Quran says, and we rescued those who believed and those who were God-fearing. And Kashani says, that is the spiritual warriors. So that means that the spiritual warriors were engaged in the Jihad al-Akbar to try to morally heal and become better, not just craftsmen, but better people and human beings.
Yes, because crafts were actually a work of art. Yes, it's a work of art, but it's art because it's giving a message about about God, about
yes. This is also
about the unity of God.
Yes, exactly. So this is also relates to what Brother Ahmad was saying, that his professor teaches about biogeometrics. So, for instance, the number 16 he mentioned, or the number 11, is the way that affects us. It has its qualitative significance. So this is the same way that the negative traits affect us. That's the, and we try to balance to be more of a qualitative kind of person. So the artisans and the arts and people who were engaged in the arts and craft who belonged to a guild, they were not only perfecting their craft, which was a practical thing and which was basically a quantitative element in their lives, but they were also trying to heal their inner self or their qualitative aspect of self.
Yes, because if they are not healing themselves, they wouldn't have been able to master the craft.
That's right.
Because mastering the craft, it means that they are mastering themselves.
Yes, that's right.
And mastering the material they're working on.
Yes.
It means that they can use the material and understand it in order to take as much of it and shows what's in the material that give a sign to the unity of God.
Yes.
So that because each material has a faculty or that corresponds to the unity of God, that needs a talented craftsman to show it.
Yes.
And
yes.
to be a talented master, it means that he is himself he's a believer.
Yes.
And
he's morally healed. He's
morally healed. He cannot be a believer unless he's morally healed.
Right.
That's why it's very important to understand the craftsman and actually it's also related because they used to work with the certain tools and they, because they are talented, I mean, in the sense of that they are very sensitive to the ratios and that geometry. I mean, the geometry. So if it's anyone who is talented, I mean, the painting or something, he is talented, but he understands the ratios and he can read it.
Yes, he knew mathematics and proportion and numbers.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. All of that. Yeah. Well, what I
by the way, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but in the first course I said that I used the Asma Allah al-Husna and repeated it according to Dr. Karim. He had the study on the Asma Allah al-Husna and how it is related to some deficiencies and diseases, pains in the neck, for example, or on any other organs. But I used it for many. I used it as he said, but in other for other reasons. I mean, for other
purposes. Yeah.
Purpose. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So what I also like to say is that each one of us is actually a work of art. So if we were to conceive ourselves as a painting or a tile or a stucco, and we were to work on ourselves in the same way that the craftsmen and guildsmen did, we ourselves would become that piece of art. So that each one of us has the potential to be a great creation in the sense of, following our beliefs and morally healing and trying to be better people in the same way that the craftsmen did that were connected to the guilds. But it takes work. It takes a greater struggle in order to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you want to go? I mean,
we could stop here and then continue on Thursday.
Yeah, unless anybody has any question. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I had.
Sorry.
This.
Sorry, Manish. Go ahead.
Yes, I had one or two questions, but in the yesterday's.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, it's in slide 9.
Slide 9.
Yes, on the dynamics. You mentioned it's a very simple one. Yes. In the third line, you mentioned that dynamics. There are 3. Is based on an energy system that moves between what we perceive and how we are motivated to act, and how we are motivated to act from what we perceive. So there is a difference between the 2 and 3rd energy moves. How we are motivated to act. How it is different to how we are motivated to act from what we perceive.
Okay, let's see. It's based on a system that moves between what we perceive and how we are motivated to act, and how we are motivated to act from what we perceive. So first, it's the perception that then we perceive something, and then that motivates us to do something. For instance, we see a child's going to be run over by a car or something, so we're motivated to act from our perception of what we've just seen. But sometimes our motivation begins it. We haven't perceived anything, but we're just motivated to do something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Like
so
we're thirsty and we're motivated. We get up to get a glass of water, but
yes.
we perceive something outside.
Okay.
Next question.
Yes.
Slide cam.
Okay, just a minute, please. I think in slide 11. Yes, it's also a simple one, but in slide 11, I think there's something about conflict.
Oh yeah, it's naturally our willpower is naturally predisposed to be fair and just and to avoid conflict. Was that it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why there is conflict? I don't understand how there is conflict. You mean between the willpower and a choice between the, if we have a choice, so we choose the good or we go with the willpower, free will. Am I right? Or
basically, I think what it means is that if we are, we see a situation where if we engage with the people, it's going to cause conflict, so we avoid it. Or if people tell us something about ourselves that if we respond to, it would cause a conflict. So we naturally try to avoid anything that will cause conflict.
Conflict between within ourselves.
Yes, within ourselves. Yes. Well, no, within ourselves to the outside world as well. It's not a conflict within ourselves. Actually, it's a conflict with something outside of ourselves. So we try to avoid that because, I mean, that's how our free will has been programmed. But when our iradeh without our ikhtiyar, but our iradeh works, then we don't avoid conflicts and we're acting against our own ikhtiyar. Do you see what I mean? We engage in arguments and disagreements and so forth. We're not, but there are many people who avoid conflict.
So it's important to be involved. I mean, to be,
yes.
And it's okay. So we need to get involved to examine. The first thing is to examine ourselves. What are we doing?
Right. But it just means that it's greater struggle to do so. For instance, to be like part of human rights groups, you know, speak out for people who are being oppressed. Well, it's easy to stay at home and not get involved to avoid conflict. So we have to work on ourselves and our motivational system to be to have such principles that no, I have to stand up for this because no one else is, or I have to stand up for this because I really believe in this. So that takes more effort than to sit back and just avoid all kinds of conflict.
Okay. Yes. I have a question, but it's you said many times that we need to make the astrological chart. I'm not sure I am aware of how to do this.
Okay, I can send a link to Brother Ahmad and he can let you know. There's a website where you can order it.
Oh, really?
Okay.
But I'm saying,
yeah. There
I
are
said
so many sites that can
Yeah,
provide.
right.
Yes,
But
horoscope.
I'm
The
not
horoscope,
sure
you need to
I'm
go-
aware of the trust
Indoor report. Yeah.
website. Oh,
Okay. Yeah, I can send you a couple. Also, but it's important if you know the day, the time. You have to ask your parents or
yes, yeah.
the time of birth. The time
Yeah.
of birth is much more important than the date of birth because it's related
almost.
to
Yeah.
Okay.
the house.
Okay.
The house of the
Yeah, you need both. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, inshallah.
Okay.
So see you Thursday, inshallah.
Inshallah.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Okay. Salam
Thank you,
alaikum.
Dr. Laleh.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ahmed. Bye bye.
you.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
اوكي شكرا يا احمد.
أشكركم. شكرا عليك.
ميرسي جدا.
Thank you so much.
شكرا.
يلا مع السلامة.
باي باي.
فين stop sharing. Stop.